Welcome to the Susana Gibb Show. I'm Susana, and this season we're talking about how we show up with mindset, confidence, and this particular episode is a lot about empowerment. I'm joined by Arnie Holtberg, former headmaster, lifelong baseball fan, and now self-published author of a series about middle school baseball and all the awkward glory in between. We're going to dive into self-publishing, talk about America's favorite pastime, how sports teach us to lead and manage, and why some of the best conversations happen with people you don't completely agree with. This one's full of wisdom, heart, and maybe a few fastballs down the middle. On with the show. On the podcast with me today is Arnie Holtberg. He is Arthur. He is an author, a former history teacher, former headmaster of a prestigious Texas school, and he's here today. We're going to talk about a lot of things. We're going to talk about how to publish books, the books that he has published, sports in middle school and the effect it has on kids and later in life, and you just never know where the conversation is going to go. So, Arnie, thank you so much for being here. Welcome
Susana,
to the show.
it's a real great pleasure to be here. Thank you for having me.
I'm so happy to meet you and talk to you. So let's start with, tell me about the book that is out and then the other one that is coming out.
Well, the first book I wrote is called Game On, One Boy's Trilogy. And it's a Bildungsroman, a coming-of-age story, tracing a boy from childhood through middle school. And it deals with the kinds of things that we all deal with in our own ways growing up. Successes, failures, friendships, disappointments, rebounding from all of the above, and trying to move forward. And it just fun. I intend for it to help young people reflect on what it is they're experiencing and to have someone whom they can refer to, so to speak, when they think about the kind of things that happen to them in school, at home, and on the playground.
Why did you decide to set them in middle school?
Well, it's because it's just simply part of growing up, and it's such a poignant part of growing up. It's
kind of a lot happening in middle school.
Emotionally, physically, every which way. Relationally, we know, in years past, and maybe even today a bit, the seventh grade was kind of the center of a lot. It was when kids reached puberty, so hormonal changes, emotional changes, relational changes, things go awry in different ways. We are brought into larger arenas. We go from smaller elementary schools to middle schools, junior high schools, where there are a lot more kids, different kind of kids. Kids are developing at such different rates. And so more goes on. And it's real life on steroids in a way.
Did you like being a part? Because there's, like you said, there is so much going on with middle schoolers, and I think it takes a certain kind of person to enjoy being around middle schoolers versus the elementary or the high school kids. Did you like that age, or was it just an opportunity to really explore some interesting themes in the book?
No, I love that age because so much goes on. I'm with elementary school children, and I've got a 4- and 7-year-old 4-year-old grandson, 7-year-old granddaughter. And it's fun to be around them. But their world, well, it can be complicated, of course. I mean, and stuff goes on with children, we know. At the same time, their world is enclosed. It's narrower. They're under adult supervision almost all the time. So it's a more confined space, not only geographically, physically, but emotionally and intellectually. You get to middle school and you have children developing at such very different rates and in such different ways, and more from a psychological point of view comes into play. I mean, more the insecurities, and we know what age group, perhaps even in this era, with the cyberbullying, which had become so darn prominent, terribly and sadly so, that what age group gets painted with the brush of cyberbullying more than any other? It's the middle school age, right? Yeah. It's the 5th, 6th, 7th grade kids who don't have the discipline, self-discipline, because they're just young and growing, to control themselves, and they get into very bad habits very quickly, and they lack what they need to navigate successfully.
So there's 2 books so far, right? The
Yes.
second book is about to come out.
Well, the second book just came out.
Oh, that's right.
It just came out. It's just on the market, and Amazon is doing I appreciate very much the job they're doing to make sure it's promoted accurately and well in bookstores. And it is called The Pathfinder, because I think, from game on, metaphorically speaking, game on. We're starting. Here we go. We're going to find our way in the Odyssey relating to classical literature. There we come. There are going to be all sorts of ups, downs, and all arounds. There are going to be sirens and whatnot. And then the Pathfinder, the young man's finding his way. He's finding his way.
I want to dip into the process of how you got the books out, and then we'll come back to some of the story stuff. So you said did you self-publish with Amazon both books?
The first book I self-published using a small group here in Dallas, Texas, and they helped me. I had an editor who was excellent and guided me and made sure that I used punctuation properly and didn't have run-on sentences and silly paragraphs, and she was excellent, and appreciate her a great deal. So I did that, and then as I decided what I would do with the second novel, I thought, well, maybe I ought to investigate finding a way, if I want more people to read it, want more kids to read it, parents to read it, teachers to read it, that maybe I need to find a way to promote and market. It sounds, for a teacher, that sounds sort of crass, to be honest with you, like self-promotion. Sounds kind of icky. You know what I mean? It's like, ooh, why do I want to draw attention to myself? Yet I've written the books to try to help, do what I've always done: teach, coach, counsel. And this is a different medium for it, but here we are. So
how do you, if I was to come to you and say, hey, I want to self-publish with Amazon, what would you tell me to do?
Well, I would go to KDP, Amazon KDP, and see what they've got on their website, and then talk with someone and investigate and get your answers, because your answers may be different from my answers, and your needs may be different from mine.
You actually got to talk to somebody, not just AI.
Well, I hope it was somebody. You don't know in the modern world, do we?
Right.
We don't know.
But it wasn't a chat. You literally had a conversation.
No, I'm teasing. Yes, I speak with human beings.
Okay.
I mean, that was my need. Maybe some people do it differently. I'm sure people do it all different ways. But I need to talk to someone from time to time. I need answers to my direct questions, and I need to be able to interact with a human being to get to where I need to get to. And I would say this, just tangentially, I'm in a writer's group with 2 of my former teachers, one former chaplain and a former English department chair. One of the English department chair was a student and a player of mine back in the 70s and early 80s in boarding school in New England. And we critique each other's writing every other month or so, because one needs a lot of criticism to get somewhere. Feedback is vital. And we all 3 of us are taking our course vis-a-vis writing very differently. One of the gentlemen just loves to write. He's written way more than a dozen books, but he does it for self-satisfaction.
Okay.
He's a preacher, so he loves to share stories.
Okay.
And that he does it for himself is great for the most part right now. The other fellow is a very, very literate man, a brilliant student and teacher of English. And he's got a book deal with in perpetuity, believe that or not, with a medium-sized publishing company. So he produces book after book after book, and they're on the market. They're on the market. So he's gone the more, not, I would say commercial, and that, again, that's for an educator, that sounds a bit crass, but he's taken a commercial route, and the books sell because they're fun. They're fun. And I've taken a wee bit different route. I'm still trying to teach through my writing, so I want to make them available.
Does Amazon offer different deals to each
You
writer?
can navigate some. Yeah, they've got standard programs.
They're like, you're going to pay this amount because you have to put money in with Amazon, right?
Correct.
Like,
correct.
You
yes,
have
you
to
do.
help with
yes,
the making of the book and promoting, and then,
well, because the editors are involved,
right?
And they have to draw a salary.
Okay,
I respect that. My first book, which was took a different path. I had to pay my editor and the publisher. Of course, there's no free lunch, someone told me once, and there isn't. So if you want it. But then with Amazon, there are multiple steps that one can go. You have different levels of operation and arrangements with Amazon.
So in theory, you can, once you get in with Amazon, they're helping you get into bookstores, but then the traditional, what I imagine with Amazon is where people go in and buy, they work out some kind of deal where you get a portion of it and they get a portion of it.
Correct. And that's where I am with the second book, not the first book, but the second book. Maybe we'll take the same route with the first book too. But at the moment, what I have is or the stage of contractual obligation and agreement with them places me where we're going to have the book shortly in 500 bookstores across the United States. But that comes, yes, with a price, because someone's got to fund getting the books into the bookstores. And then when they're sold, the bookstores need to make a living. They have to pay their rent and their employees and make a profit. Amazon, same thing. And Arnie Holtberg, same thing.
Right.
So, and that's all outlined. I mean, it's very clear. To me, it makes logical, good sense. But a lot of people may not want to take that step because there's a risk.
Right.
Because the books may be in 500 bookstores, and
right. How do you keep them?
One may get sold, and none may get sold.
Right. How do you keep from getting put underneath other books and nobody ever finds it?
Aha! My agreement requires a certain placement in the stores.
So that's
that's
part of what
also
you got.
part of it. Yeah, it's like every other contract. You stipulate, both sides stipulate.
Right.
You negotiate, you navigate, and Amazon has guaranteed, and that's easy to test. I can just walk into Walmart. I can walk into Barnes and Noble, those places, Target, and see where they've got my book. And if they don't have it in the proper place, they have violated their contract. So I trust they will do what we have contractually agreed to. And it's.
Are they doing any marketing of the book?
Yes.
Okay.
And if one were to go online and look up Arnold or Arnie Holtberg and the Pathfinder and even Game On, you would find a lot of marketing going on.
Interesting.
A lot.
That's so neat. That's so cool.
And frightening.
Oh, I'm sure.
And frightening too.
Yes.
Yeah, both.
So let's talk a little bit about the book itself, because I know you said it's about, the young man in middle school. And on the cover of Game On, there's a baseball diamond.
Right.
Why did you choose baseball and not football or soccer or the 1,000 other sports that are out there?
Because baseball is my favorite sport, and it's the American game. You know, even today, it's still arguably the American game. It's always been thought of as such. I know it's diminished in importance and sociologically and culturally, but it's still America's game. It's the recognizable. We started baseball here. We started American football too, but it's a universal principle concept in America, and so that made great sense. Plus, I loved playing baseball. Played baseball.
What position did you play?
I was a catcher.
You were the
and
catcher.
If you notice, there's a catcher's mitt on the cover of Game On. I didn't choose that. Someone else chose it because they thought it would.
What did you love about being the catcher? Aside from you get the ball every single play.
One, the catchers are in charge and involved with everything. So I just love being involved. Catching the ball is sort of metaphorical in a way, but I like calling the shots.
Gotcha.
I like calling the shots. I like being responsible, and that may be a plus. It may be a minus, but it's what I chose to do. Did it for 14 years.
I was a pitcher.
Were you?
I was.
Well, I could have earned a degree in psychiatry because I handled pitchers for 14 years.
Well, we need to be handled because we're a hot mess up there.
Tell me about it.
Oh, my heavens. Hot mess on the mound.
Yeah.
It's really hard, I think. It's nice to have a really strong catcher who can manage everything else because it's hard to manage yourself and manage this is where, and manage the morale of the infield while you're still trying to not throw balls across the plate all the time,
Right. And I will say this too, and I don't think this is a stretch at all. If one is thoughtful about the role of the catcher, that you speak about hot messes, I would never describe any of my pitchers as hot messes. A lot of other things maybe. But you have to handle each individual differently.
Well, that's a management style too, right? You learn.
You can't handle each individual equally. It just doesn't work. That's not human life. It's like managing people in any setting. If you're overseeing people, person X responds to this behavior. Some people respond very well to certain kinds of criticism. Others fall apart if they're criticized a certain way. So how do you get the most out of everybody? And I learned, thankfully, because of coaches I had when I was just a small child, that you had to handle people differently, which was remarkable that when I was 8, 9, 10 years old, I had adults who could help me learn that, which was a great gift.
Well, and then I think there's a level of coaching, right? There's the one coach who yells at every single player, no matter what.
Yep.
And they're not going to get the same outcome as the coach who's really looking at what each kid needs to be successful.
Well, and in that vein, too, you're absolutely right. I was just reading something by a very prominent business psychologist, I'll call him. I don't think that's the accurate term, but someone who writes about management and personnel management and psychology, particularly in the workplace, and was saying that, surprise, surprise, we find that people who yell, like coaches who yell at their kids all the time or yell at their players all the time, help people develop less well than do coaches who manage by providing feedback, which is critical. You've got to know whether you're doing things right or wrong, but also who can give encouragement when necessary, recognize that some people are built with greater toughness than others, and so you manage individuals differently. And that's not manipulative, that's just commonsensical. If you want to get the best, and if your goal is to have the best organization, then you manage everybody according to his or her strengths and weaknesses and talents. And I learned that as a catcher, what a great gift. When I was 10 or 12, I sure didn't know I was learning all that. But by the time I was a senior in high school, I did know it. I'm 17, 18 years of age. One better know it. I think you should be mature enough to start recognizing the complexity of life. And so what a gift, what fun. So baseball can be an analogy, metaphor for a lot in this life of ours.
So I read your article about going to a game, and a recent game with youth kids, and you were watching the coaches give the signs into the players.
Yes.
And how the players don't have as much autonomy, and are we hurting the kids by not giving them that? Which I thought was interesting. Now, my daughter is also a pitcher right now. And
Very
so
good.
I shared that with her. And she was like, she didn't quite agree, because teenagers know everything, of course, as you can imagine.
Yep.
But she said, and I see both sides of it, honestly, because you do want to empower the kids. But her response was, but Mom, there's so much more data now, and the coaches can see that batter's last 10 at bats in 1 second, right?
Yep.
But it's the data versus intuition.
Yeah.
You know?
Well, and we do rely on so-called analytics to a great extent. That's the post-Moneyball.
Yeah.
You read the novel, saw the movie.
Great.
Everybody wanted to see, at least a lot of people want to see Brad Pitt in
Well,
Moneyball.
that was my first thought.
There we go.
You were like, you said the book. I was like, oh, I just thought about Brad Pitt, right?
Right. But Michael Lewis has written some wonderful books, and that is one of them. Very, 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 very wonderful and apt description of the way sports at the professional and now amateur level have been transformed by analytics. Now, the question is, terrific, is the change all for the good? One should ask that question. That's a more reasonable question than we give it credit for. So I'll take you back to 1956. In 1956, New York Yankees, Brooklyn Dodgers, World Series, the good old days back in New York. Don Larson threw the only perfect game in the history of World Series. The only perfect game.
Okay.
Yogi Berra was the catcher, who was sometimes, made fun of, it ain't over till it's over and all of that. And he was so unwise that in that game, I'm trying to think, 1956, I think it was Larson threw 97 pitches.
That's a lot.
Well, it's not. Well, today it seems like a lot, but it was a complete game when people did throw complete games.
Right.
You finished what you started once upon a time. And you're a pitcher, you know about that or not. So Larson threw 97 pitches. Yogi Berra called every one of those pitches himself. The benches weren't involved at all in those days. They weren't involved at all. And when I played, the bench was never involved either. Perfect game. Every pitch called by the catcher. The pitcher never shook the catcher off once. So tell me about analytics. If I get the analytics correctly, a perfect game under those conditions, what do I need somebody on the bench figuring out what player X, Y, or Z did in the last 10 at-bats? It's over-analysis, what we might call paralysis of the analysis. And it's like, my wife and I, we have a place in central Arkansas, and we went in to see the Travelers, which is, but now I don't know who they used to be Texas farm team, I think, AA team. Went to see them play 3 or 4 years ago, and it was a beautiful summer night. And the Travelers used 3 pitchers. The starter pitched 6 innings. The middle reliever pitched 2 innings. The closer pitched 1. They threw a no-hitter. 3 pitchers threw a no-hitter.
Wow.
Well, yeah, wow is right. I don't know whether that had ever happened before in the history of minor league baseball or major league baseball or any baseball for that matter, but it was certainly notable, national news. Somehow, I'm not sure that makes perfectly good sense. Why didn't the gentleman who threw the first 6 innings go into the 7th inning and keep pitching? Because we were trying to slice things so tightly, so closely, so perfectly that we ended up where we are. So it's a great outcome. It's a nifty story, but are we trying to over control everything in the modern era? And are the players any better for it? And do the players learn? Really, to my point, and I coached and I played and coached. Are they learning anything about responsibility?
Interesting.
Do I want employees in my workplace who cannot make or do not have to make decisions by themselves and have to depend on their boss to tell them what to do every step of the way? When push comes to shove and there's something difficult and immediate, who's going to make the decision? And if you aren't practiced at it, you're not going to be emotionally capable of doing it. So I understand what your daughter's saying. They've got the analytics, but they've grown up believing
that the data.
The post Moneyball, data's king. And what I hear in big league baseball, from some people, and I have relationships with people in big league baseball, is that they're starting not to believe it so much anymore.
Fascinating.
Yeah.
When you were coaching and you were trying to teach kids, listen, you got to focus. And they were like, I'm trying, coach. How would you teach somebody to focus if you didn't like zone in, block out the exterior? How would you teach somebody to focus?
Well, it's very challenging because it's an emotional thing, not always just an intellectual or mental thing. So it's just a matter of putting kids in the situation and practicing and repeating. Practicing and repeating. If you've been in a situation, you succeed, you fail, reflect, get feedback. How might I do it differently the next time out? In fact, the other night I had a conversation with one of my former students who, like I was a place kicker. I kicked in high school and college, and this young man kicked in high school. I don't know if he kicked in college, but he and I were talking with some other his classmates and at a gathering, and one of the gentlemen reminded me of something I had said in a chapel talk the week after our place kicker failed.
Okay.
He missed a field goal that cost us, the team, the school's team, the game. A failure. And when you're the kicker, you're there by yourself.
You got one job.
And you're it. You can't hide.
Yeah.
There's no hiding. So I had a similar experience in college. My senior year, I had missed a field goal in a critical game against an arch rival, and we lost. And there I was. So I decided the following week in chapel to talk about failure and success and how there are no undefeated lives. And, the only thing you can do if you fall off your horse is get back on and ride again. And concentrate and concentrate and concentrate and do it better. Repeat, repeat, repeat what works. Repeat, repeat, repeat. And I was talking to the young man the other night, and he agreed the same thing. And you know what happened with that young man? We ended up in the championship game a couple, 3 weeks later, whatever timing it was. And guess what happened? There was a field goal attempt. And the field goal kicker was called upon to win or lose the game. And he won the game. He hit the field goal. And we reflected on what made the difference for the two of us, because I had to go back and kick myself after my abject failure. And he said, I knew I just had to go out to practice and concentrate, to focus, and do what I knew to do best, and to practice, 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 and repeat, repeat, repeat. And the rest kind of was history. And that's analogous to all of life, I think, as well.
Isn't it?
It's analogous to all of life, to be honest with you.
If you fail, practice, come back, and then have a success, you learn that it's possible in a stakes that is not life and death. Sports is generally not life and death. Not that
it does feel like it when
death.
you're a 16-year-old kid and you miss a field goal with the stands filled and
it's a lot of pressure.
It is, but it isn't life and death.
Right.
No, you can recover from just about everything if you choose to.
Right.
If you choose to.
But it's a very good lesson, to your point, for later in life, right?
Yep.
How to perform under pressure.
Yep.
To have those lessons. I was talking with a woman who, she didn't play sports. She started to, but then she fell and got hurt, and her mom said, oh, you don't have to play anymore. So she doesn't know how to play hurt. I was like, you never learned how to play hurt. Sometimes you got to just play when you don't feel good,
Well, the whole notion, remember the book that came out 10, 20 years ago, I can't remember, but the business about the skin knee, that modern kids, look it up, please.
Okay.
I can't remember exactly when it came out, but it's about kids who've got to learn to live with skin knees.
Yeah.
Stuff goes wrong, whether it's your fault or not. We get hurt, we get bruised, we get this and that. Well, guess what? That's called human life.
Figure it out.
It's called human life, and if we're protected from it, then we don't don't develop resilience. We don't know how to come back from failure. We don't know how to come back from difficulty. And, again, there are no undefeated lives. I've said that so many times. so many times. I'll leave it at that. And it's true. You don't. I don't know. Look at what happened a couple of years ago. Our Texas Rangers. They didn't win 70% of the regular season games they played. They got into the playoffs. They ended up winning the World Series, and they lost approximately a third of the games they played, and yet they were the world champs. So if failure defined them, they're not the world champs.
That's true. That's
right?
true. Yeah.
And I think that's a metaphor for life. My life is, I barely have an undefeated day, I tell people, How do you have one of those? And if you're diminished by every lack of success, every failure, you're not going to achieve all that you can. Teddy Roosevelt's famous quote about the man in the arena who's bloodied, but not bowed kind of thing. Well, there we go. Why not? Why not? It makes sense to me.
I think there's so many lessons from sports, from grit and perseverance, right? Continuing to play, even when you don't want to play.
Right.
That practice, focus, getting up from failure to moving on, how you manage people, all of these things from the sports world that you can take into life and your business. Obviously not is everybody cut out for sports? I'm thinking about there's always that one kid who didn't play sports. How do they learn these things?
And there are other ways. Sports isn't the only vehicle. It could be the arts. What if you're in the choir?
True.
What if you're in the play? What if you're a ceramist? What if you're a debater? And you stumble on a question and you lose in a debate championship because you stumble on a question. What do? Quit debating?
No.
Or do you go back and prepare better the next time and ask your coach to help you be better? So I think sports is a universal. I mean, how many kids play sports? I mean, I was just, again with my grandkids up in St. Louis, and they're at 4 and 7. They're involved in kids sports, and they're learning how to do things, how to succeed, how to fail, how to be teammates,
how to be a teammate, that's huge.
How to work with others, how to console a teammate when a teammate doesn't succeed, fails. Those kinds of things. So very, very important. And you can have similar experiences in other areas, but sports is right there. And it ought to be low stakes, even though we make it very high stakes from time to time, if not often.
What do you think about, because obviously you've seen lots of eras of sports, and you're now seeing kids' sports. Yeah. And I don't know, it wasn't maybe 3 weeks ago, I got an email from my kids' soccer organization outlining their expectations of parent behavior. Mm-hmm. And things that I would not expect need to be outlined, but were outlined. It was like, you will not touch a ref. Mm-hmm. You will not physically harm a ref. You will not speak with language to a ref. I'm like, this is 7-year-old kids soccer. Come on, people. What is going on?
Well, as a nation, as a culture, let's call it that, how did we ever decide to get to this point? And why are we tolerating any of this sort of uncivil, disrespectful behavior at any level? I think it's unacceptable, and I think that we've got plenty of role models in the big bad world which tell us that it's acceptable to say disrespectful things and profane things to others. A very good friend and someone with whom I've worked developing programs for schools is a gentleman named Gus Lee. And Gus is United States Military Academy, 1968, served in the Army, of course, and he went back and worked at the Point. His mentor was General Norman Schwarzkopf, whom we all know, the Bear. And with the Bear, he developed some principles and concepts about leadership. and eventually wrote a book called Courage, the Backbone of Leadership, and then another book to follow that about the playbook, which is taking the concepts and putting them into lessons, literally into lessons for all of us to use. And he also wrote a book called Lessons Learned from the Bear, which is a nice little book. And Gus outlines the principles that are about leadership, courage, the right way to do things. First, the leadership and ethics program at West Point was developed under his guidance, and that's pretty good standard, if you ask me. Pretty good standard. And Gus says, number one go, he's got the goes and the no's. Number one go is treat everyone with unconditional respect. Treat everyone with unconditional respect. That doesn't mean you and I agree.
Right.
But I need to be respectful to you, and I should expect that you will be respectful to me. How did America get to the point where we are, and that we've got to remind parents not to curse referees or even threaten them physically at a game for a 7 or 8 year old, or any age for that matter.
Any age. But yes.
In a professional game. Right. How did we get here? We ought to reflect. I think we ought to reflect a lot harder as a nation as to how we got here, and we ought to be reinforced. Back to reinforcement. We ought to establish the values and reinforce the values, and not tolerate any wavering on the front. And I'm absolutely firm on that. If we had parents who misbehaved in the schools I was at, well, those parents were in major trouble. And might be disallowed from going to contests, for that matter, if they decided to cross the wrong boundary.
Right.
Period. And certainly kids wouldn't tolerate a violation of school rules. You get thrown out of school for going too far, for goodness sakes. So I'm deeply concerned about all of that, and some of it is that why do adults have the investment they have in their children? Back up. We ought to have full investment in our children's lives, but not in controlling their lives, nor in allowing our egos to be dependent on whether our child succeeds or fails on a given day. That seems. I don't want to. I was going to use a very negative word, and I will not. But it just doesn't make sense to me. It doesn't make any sense to me.
Well, it goes back to empowering children to make their own decisions, so they can be adults who can make their own decisions.
Right.
Do you struggle with the free speech line?
I do not struggle with free speech as a principle. In fact, I was just having a conversation earlier today with someone about this. It seems like I have several conversations a week about it. I believe firmly in freedom of speech. I believe it's a very it's a foundational American principle, period.
Yes.
Check the Constitution.
Right, it's in there.
Let's start there. Simple. But I believe that principle must be coupled with what Gus Lee articulates about unconditional positive respect. You and I should be able to speak freely to each other, but we must. We're free to speak freely, but we must be respectful of each other. You and I should be able to disagree on just about everything, if not everything. But darn it, I need to treat you like a worthy human being. And that's where we're failing a lot too, I believe, quite frankly. We just...
Are we teaching the kids now? I just don't know sometimes if the adults throwing punches at soccer games are going to learn that lesson, right? Do we just give up on them and teach the kids? Or how do we come back to this civil discourse with leaders who would embody it?
Well, that's right. And in fact, I just gave a talk yesterday morning on leadership, and one of the things I reflected on was an interview I had last summer, nearly a year ago, and I was asked in the interview, how do I define leadership? And I defined it pretty succinctly. I think And one of it was that, you decide what you believe, you say what you believe, you tell the truth in every circumstance, you reside there, and you treat other people respectfully and listen to them. And then you can end up agreeing and disagreeing, but at least you are in the game together, so to speak. You're in the game together, and we can be a community, we can be a family, we can be a nation. We don't have to agree to do all that, but to call each other names is unacceptable to me. It's unacceptable. I don't know. In fact, I was talking just before I came to this interview. I was talking with someone, and the individual was reflecting on some of my interactions with others who were difficult to deal with, maybe even disagreeable, and said, "Well, you just don't become disagreeable in turn. What you do is say, no, here's what I believe, and I disagree with you, Susana." That's got to be okay, especially in a free society such as America. It better be.
Yeah.
But if I have to call you a name because you disagree with me, in fact, I just had a case 2 weeks ago where I'm on a distribution list with a bunch of men that I went to a men's college when there were such things. And there was one of the modern issues on the table, and I articulated a thought, and I thought I articulated it respectfully without
name calling.
There was no name calling for sure, but I think it was clear and direct, and people could respond as they were. One man called me names, profane names, wrote up I was nothing but a fill in the blank. How does that foster discourse? How does that keep us in the same conversation? How does that enable us to get better together?
I don't know.
Because we have always disagreed with each other in America and the world, but in America, and yet we're a United States. Anyway, it's a challenge, but it's real.
Challenge.
And with the thing with sports and so on, I think we've gotten to a very, very challenging, if not worse, situation where we're too invested in outcomes rather the wrong outcomes. The wrong outcomes, where kids learning how to win, to lose, to be teammates, to console each other, to help each other, to play by the rules.
Yes,
all those
play
kind
by
of things
the rules, not just bend the rules.
That we used to value a lot more in this country.
No, I was going to say, if you want to tell this last one, but then I got to wrap it up.
No,
I got to look for the ending, sadly.
All right, go ahead.
Only for the podcast.
All right,
Maybe we can have coffee and you can tell me all your stories.
No, you don't need to hear all my stories.
Well,
That'd take more than coffee. But here's one story about sports.
Okay.
And who's important and what's important and how it's all important.
Okay.
My senior year in high school, we had a very good baseball team, and we were in the state championship team in our division, call it division, and we went into extra innings. It is the longest state championship baseball game on record in the history of the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, still to this day, and this is 1966 when it happened. We went 15 innings, and in the bottom of the 15th, thankfully we were, the home team, I guess, but we had numbers 7, 8, and 9 batting. Terrible situation to be in, correct?
Okay.
Who would you wouldn't have drawn that up if
That's the bottom of
we
the
were
lineup.
We were figuring, okay, we're gonna play 16 innings. Good luck. Number 7 got a base hit.
Ooh.
Number 8 bunted him to second. Number 9, the
very last.
The least able hitter on the team got a base hit and scored the state championship winning run. That tells me more than anything about what teamwork and who matters. That 7, 8, 9 won the state championship game for us. It wasn't the heroes during the regular season. It was the least of us who caused us to take the championship trophy home. That's what sports is all about to me, not analytics. That's what it's heart and soul and kids doing what kids need to do.
That's a great way to end it. Thank you so much for being with
you.
me today.
Well,
This was
thank
so
you.
fun.
It's
I
been
really
fun.
enjoyed
Yeah, I
it.
agreed it.
Will you say one more
Enjoyed it a
time
lot.
how people can find you? Where can they find your books?
Well, online, just look up Arnie Holtberg and
Okay.
look up Game On and the Pathfinder and Amazon.
There you
Amazon,
go.
of course. Yes. Thank you.
Fantastic.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Honestly, I wish I knew Arnie better. You know, as a catcher, he probably talked some trash in his day. And while insurance and podcasting may not seem to go together, it's to connect, to learn, and to serve the incredible people in our community. But here is the official tie-in, because at Gibb Insurance Services, we are proud to support the leagues, teams, and organizations that bring people together, offering specialized insurance for sports leagues, including liability, accident, and equipment coverage. Because when you're out there building confidence, teamwork, and resilience, we've got your back. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you next time on The Susana Gibb Show.